The Lord be with you.
And with your spirit.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Mark. In the course of his teaching, Jesus said to the crowd, "Beware of scribes who like going around in long robes and accepting greetings in marketplaces, seats of honor in synagogues, and places of honor at banquets. They devour the houses of the widows and as a pretext recite lengthy prayers. They will receive a very severe condemnation." He sat down opposite the treasury and observed how the crowds put money into the treasury. Many rich people put large sums. A poor widow also came and put in 2 small coins worth a few cents. Calling his disciples to himself, he said to them, "Amen, I say to you, the poor widow put in more than all the other contributors to the treasury. For they have all contributed from their surplus wealth, but she, from her poverty, has contributed all she had, her whole livelihood." The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise you, Lord. I begin with a story that describes some people within our world. And someone has even said that this story is true. Wasn't able to verify that, but whether true or not, it's kind of sad. Starts off with a local organization. Each year, they needed to raise some funds in order to continue their works of charity. Well, as they began, the organizers of the fundraiser realized that they had never received a donation from one of the town's most successful businessmen. And so the person in charge of the contributions decided to call this man in order to persuade him to contribute to the cause. The person in charge got the businessman on the phone and said, "Good morning, sir. As you know, every year we seek donations to support our works of charity. And our research has shown that out of your annual income of at least $1 million, you have never given anything to charity. Sir, wouldn't you like to support your community by way of a donation?" The businessman thought about it for a moment and then replied, "First of all, did your research also show my mother is dying after a long illness and has medical bills that are several times her annual income?" Embarrassed, the person seeking the contribution quietly mumbled, "No." The businessman continued, "Did your research also show that my older brother, a disabled veteran, is blind and confined to a wheelchair?" The other person wanted to apologize, but was interrupted when the businessman added, "Or that my sister's husband died in a traffic accident, leaving her penniless with 3 small children." The person in charge simply said, "Sir, I had no idea." He then was trying to make an apology, but the businessman cut him off and said, "And so, if I do not give any money to them, why should I give any money to you?" Most people's mouths dropped when I said that. I couldn't verify if that story was true or not, but But I came across something that indicated that it was. That might describe some people in the world of today, but I don't believe it describes us here at St. Mary's. As a parish, I've always found this community to be generous when it comes to giving to works of charity. For instance, last week, when the Knights of Columbus asked for donations to help support the orphanages that we help in Mexico, they collected over $1,000. There's always been a good collection of canned goods every first Sunday of the month from us as a parish. And as a parish, we had one of the largest donations given to Catholic Relief Services. But, my friends, this weekend, what I want us to do is to look at our motivation behind our generosity. Because it's one thing to give out of our abundance. It's another to give because of our faith and trust in our gracious God. What I want us to do today is to look what has taken place in the first reading and in that gospel. We began with that first reading, which is about Elijah meeting a widow. At that time, there was a terrible drought that took place, which resulted in a famine. Sadly, the poor, then as now, suffered the worst. The widow that Elijah met was a younger woman, or at least she was younger than other widows. We know that fact because she has a child, a small child, to care for. It seems as if her life was filled with tragedy. Her husband has died. In a drought, a famine came over the land. She was certain that she would have to watch her son die of starvation. She also knew that soon afterwards she would die because she was preparing the very last meal that she had. And yet Elijah, under these circumstances, approaches this widow and asks for food. With all things considered, it seems that the request of Elijah was insensitive. Or at least, it seems that he ignored or didn't want to recognize the desperate situation of this woman. But for me, what is more amazing is that the widow agreed to share her last meal. Why would she do that? Let me explain. During that time, there was a solemn law of hospitality that required the people to care for the travelers of that land. It was their way, their faith expression, to honor their God. If the widow had refused to share what she had with Elijah, she would be committing a great sin against God. But put yourself in that situation of the widow and ask yourself, what would you have done? I think the majority of us would probably say, come on, God will understand. This is my last meal. I'm going to keep this food for myself and for my son. Come on, God would understand. My friends, the faith of the widow said, do whatever God requires of you. Do the virtuous thing. And she does. She placed her faith in God above logic and gave that which she really needed. She placed herself in God's hand and trusted with what she needed for herself and her son, it would be provided. That was her motivation. Faith in God, doing the right thing by not offending God, by following that law of hospitality. And how does God respond? Each day for an entire year, as she emptied her flour jar for that day's meal, God would refill it the next day. To her one meal, God gave 365 meals. There is an important point to be made. Notice that God didn't give her the entire supply, the year's worth of supply on that first day. God wanted her, and let me just say, God wants us to trust Him for our daily bread, for our daily life. And the widow did. And God rewarded her, and she and her son survived the drought and the famine. Let's jump to the gospel. Jesus sat down opposite the temple treasury, and He's noticing many wealthy people giving large sums of money. But what really caught His attention was a poor widow who came to put in 2 small coins, which was worth very little. Jesus saw that, and He tells the disciples that she has placed more into the temple treasury than all the others. My friends, on a surface level, what a lie. No, she didn't. Her offering was very little compared to the large amounts offered by the people of great wealth. But what Jesus recognized in this widow was her motivation behind her offering. The question to look at is, what in the world, or better yet, what beyond this world would cause this poor widow to give everything she had to live on as an offering to the temple? The answer is simply that she wanted to honor her God. Out of their surplus, the wealthy people were giving to impress all those in the temple area, all those who were watching. Their motivation was recognition. On the other hand, as far as we know, that widow didn't even know that Jesus was watching her. In her mind and in her heart, she was giving her offering to honor an audience of one, God who was in heaven. For her, that was enough to notice her offering. And let me just say, it was the right disposition in order to please her God. Today, because of the readings, we need to consider our offering to the temple treasury. What is our motivation in giving to the church? Is it motivated by our faith in God? Is our offering a true sacrifice on our part? There was once a person who was known to be a wonderful, great cook, and was called by another person who had a question about preparing a Thanksgiving meal. The other woman, it seemed, had found a turkey that had been in her freezer for over 8 years. And she was wondering, was it safe to prepare that turkey? The cook warned this woman that even if it were safe, the flavor of the meat had probably long been gone. And so she said, I wouldn't recommend preparing that turkey, and much less eating it. And the other woman's reply was, that's what I thought. I'll just give it to the church. I know that story to be true because thankfully the cook called me after she had hung up with this other woman and told me, Father, don't eat that turkey that woman is preparing. I must say, the cats in the neighborhood had a good Thanksgiving meal that day. My friends, if we want to please our God with our offering, we need to learn to make it a true sacrifice. In other words, it cannot be something that we can no longer use, or something out of our abundant surplus. What we will find is that the sacrifices we make will become a blessing for us and our families, because God will honor that sacrifice made by us by blessing us with even more, as He did with that widow in the first reading. best example, best reason to give unto our God, look at it through this story. A boy and his mother were in a local grocery store, and because any time a customer spent a certain amount on their groceries, the owner, in thanksgiving and gratitude, would allow the children to reach into a bowl of candy, and whatever they could grab was theirs, free. And so the owner told the little boy he could take whatever his hand could hold. The little boy just looked up at the owner and stood still. So the owner said, "Go ahead, little one. Go ahead and take whatever you can grab." The boy didn't make a move. Again, the owner said, "You can have all the candy your hand can hold." But again, the boy just stood there and did nothing. So the owner himself reaches into the bowl, pulls out some candy, and gives it to that little boy. When the boy left that store, his pockets were stuffed with candy. When they got outside, the mother asked why he himself didn't get his own handful of candy. And the boy said, "Mom, it was because the hands of the owner are bigger than mine." Pretty smart little one. My friends, whatever we give to the church, don't ever think that we can outdo our God. His response to us is with bigger hands, and let me assure you, He has deeper pockets. This weekend, because of the readings, it would be good for us to evaluate the motivation behind our giving unto the church. And please understand me well. I'm not saying to evaluate the amount you give. In the gospel, Jesus knew that the wealthy people gave much more than that widow in terms of the size of the gift, the amount. But that was not what He was looking at. Jesus was measuring the intention of the heart, and the offering of that widow came out on top. Why? Because it was much greater than the others, because it was a true sacrifice in order to honor her God. What about us? Is what we give a true sacrifice on our part to honor our God? Our audience of one. One who doesn't look at the amount, but looks at the heart. In our generous offering, do we truly honor our God as He deserves? No doubt, it takes great faith and trust in God to give over and above. But let me assure you, when we do, God will award us with His great hands, which are filled with so many more blessings that we can imagine. Today, we have candidates and catechumens here among us. What you are offering is a gift of yourself. Make sure you know the motivation behind that gift of yourself. We as a community will offer you as we gather around this altar in the rite of welcome. And so I'm going to ask that they be presented unto our community so that the gift that you bring of yourself might be received in faith and on your part in trust in our God. As your name is called, I'm going to ask that you present yourself before the community, and those who are sponsoring or supporting them on this day, I want to ask that you come with them as well.
Yes.